Detective Lisa Monroe was no stranger to the bizarre and unexplainable. Still, the latest series of murders in the city had left even her most seasoned colleagues scratching their heads. Each crime scene was eerily similar. No signs of forced entry, no apparent motive, and the most puzzling detail of all, the perpetrators had no memory of committing the crimes. The first case involved a mild-mannered accountant named Tim Harris. He was found standing over his wife's lifeless body, covered in blood, a knife clutched in his trembling hand. The look of confusion and horror on his face was genuine. He insisted he couldn't remember anything after sitting down to watch a television show the night before. The evidence was damning, but his amnesia was too consistent with a psychological break. The second case was even stranger. A kindergarten teacher, Emily Carter, was found kneeling beside the body of her neighbor, a local butcher. Once again, there were no signs of a struggle, and Emily had no recollection of ever entering the man's house. She was cooperative, pleading with the detectives to believe that she had no reason to harm him. Detective Monroe couldn't shake the feeling that these cases were connected in some twisted way. She spent hours combing through the files, searching for any common thread that might link the victims and the supposed killers. One night, as she was poring over the case notes in her dimly lit office, something clicked. Each of the alleged killers had recently attended a wellness seminar hosted by a renowned hypnotist, Dr. Samuel Hartman. Dr. Hartman's seminars were wildly popular. He claimed to help people overcome their deepest fears and unlock their hidden potential through the power of hypnosis. His following was loyal and diverse, ranging from high-powered executives to stay-at-home parents. Monroe decided it was time to pay him a visit. The next morning, Monroe and her partner, Detective James O'Connor, arrived at Dr. Hartman's sleek, modern office. The waiting room was filled with soothing music and the scent of lavender. The receptionist greeted them with a warm smile and led them to Hartman's private office. "Detectives, what can I do for you today?" Hartman asked, his voice smooth and calming. Monroe wasted no time. "We're investigating a series of murders. Dr. Hartman, each of the alleged killers attended one of your seminars shortly before the crimes. We need to know if you can offer any insight." Hartman's expression remained neutral, but Monroe noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. "I assure you, Detective, my seminars are designed to help people. I have no control over their actions once they leave my office." "Can you explain why they have no memory of committing these crimes?" O'Connor pressed. Hartman leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Hypnosis can be a powerful tool. It's possible that someone with malicious intent could implant suggestions or triggers in a vulnerable subject's mind. But I must stress, I would never do such a thing." Monroe and O'Connor left Hartman's office with more questions than answers. They needed proof that he was behind the murders, but Hartman was a master of his craft. They decided to attend one of his seminars undercover, hoping to catch him in the act. The seminar was held in a grand hotel ballroom filled with eager participants. Hartman took the stage, his presence commanding and reassuring. Monroe and O'Connor watched as he effortlessly guided the crowd into a deep state of relaxation. His voice was hypnotic, weaving a tapestry of words that seemed to bypass the conscious mind entirely. As the seminar progressed, Monroe felt herself being drawn into Hartman's spell. She fought to stay focused, to remain aware of her surroundings. When the session ended, she noticed several participants leaving the room with dazed expressions, as if they were sleepwalking. Monroe and O'Connor followed one of the participants, a young woman named Karen, back to her apartment. They observed her closely over the next few days, waiting for any sign that she might be triggered into violent behavior. Just as they were beginning to lose hope, their patience paid off. One evening, as Karen sat in her living room watching television, she suddenly stood up and walked to her kitchen. Monroe and O'Connor watched in horror as she picked up a large kitchen knife and began moving towards her bedroom, where her roommate was sleeping. Monroe burst through the door, tackling Karen to the ground before she could reach the bedroom. Karen struggled against Monroe's grip, her eyes glassy and unfocused. "I don't know what's happening," she cried. "Please help me." Monroe and O'Connor managed to subdue Karen and bring her to the station for questioning. She was genuinely terrified and had no memory of picking up the knife. They were dealing with a sleeper agent, just as they had suspected. Back at the station, Monroe and O'Connor began to piece together a plan to catch Hartman in the act. They needed solid evidence that he was implanting these subconscious triggers. They decided to confront him with Karen's case, hoping to provoke a reaction. When they arrived at Hartman's office, Monroe could feel the tension in the air. She laid out the evidence they had gathered, including Karen's statements and the surveillance footage of her actions. Hartman maintained his calm demeanor, but there was a flicker of anger in his eyes. "You have no proof that I am responsible for this," he said, his voice steady. Monroe leaned in, her eyes locked on his. "We know you're behind this, Hartman. It's only a matter of time before we find the proof we need. But you can make this easier on yourself by confessing now." Hartman's facade cracked. He stood up, his hands trembling. "You don't understand the power of the mind, Detective. These people, they were willing participants. I gave them what they wanted." "And what was that?" Monroe demanded. "Freedom," Hartman replied, his voice growing more unsteady. "Freedom from their inhibitions, from their fears. I unlocked their potential." Monroe felt a chill run down her spine. Hartman truly believed he was helping these people, even as he turned them into unwitting murderers. She knew they needed to act quickly before he could hurt anyone else. That night, armed with a warrant, Monroe and O'Connor returned to Hartman's office. They searched every inch of the space, but it seemed as though Hartman had anticipated their move. Frustration grew as they combed through the office, finding nothing. Just as they were about to give up, Monroe noticed an odd detail. A book on one of the shelves was slightly askew, its spine different from the others. She pulled it, and to her surprise, the bookshelf shifted, revealing a hidden room behind it. Inside, they found a trove of evidence, recordings of Hartman's hypnosis, sessions, detailed notes on his victims, and a list of triggers he had implanted in their minds. It was a chilling testament to Hartman's twisted experiments. Hartman was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and conspiracy. As the news of his arrest spread, the city breathed a collective sigh of relief. The nightmare was over. In the months that followed, Monroe couldn't shake the memory of Hartman's chilling conviction. The power of the mind was indeed formidable, and she knew there would always be those who sought to exploit it for their own twisted purposes. But she also knew that as long as she and O'Connor were on the case, they would stand ready to protect the innocent from the shadows lurking in the depths of the human psyche.